at 80 1080. Geoff, hello.
Good evening. Hi, how are you, Tim?
Good, thanks.
Just thought I'd add to the discussion around the firearm legislation that was announced there today, and obviously there was some callers there before, a wee bit confused about the difference between licensing and having
I had a mental blank. It's a register, yes, on the guns themselves.
So we did used to have a register many, many years ago, and I'll preface it by saying in all my years, I've never met anyone around the sport who was ever against the register. Most guys you'll find will say getting rid of it was the dumbest thing we ever did.
Yeah.
But the discussion now is how do we get the genie back in the bottle now that we have? And over the years, there was firearms registration. It was very laborious because it was pre-computer days, and it meant 2 or 3 trips backs and forwards between the gun store and the police station to get it registered and so forth. The police actually didn't like the paperwork from that, and they actually lobbied the Muldoon government, who changed it in 92. And we went to a licensing system where we licensed the holder, and it was a lifetime license originally, and then in the mid-90s, after the Aramoana incident, we changed it to a 10-year licensing system. So everyone has a license, very much similar to a passport, but it's on a driver's license style card, and your basic details are kept on that through the police computer system, but there's no registration of firearms. And so over that last sort of 40-odd years, we've had possibly in the order of a couple of million firearms imported by the industry that we really don't know the whereabouts and the locations of. And to be fair, by and large, they've been used safely, except when they fall into the hands of gangs and criminals. And
that's a big but, or if
but the thing is now is when we say, well, can we get full compliance on firearms registration, that's going to be a very big ask. And that was part of the basis of a lot of the legislation brought in today was bringing forward the 1997 Thorpe report, and that was done, obviously, in the wake of Aramoana. And a lot of those recommendations were peer-reviewed by law enforcement agencies around the world, including the FBI, who said, yeah, great in theory, but once that genie's out of the bottle and you've had 40 years of importing firearms, it's almost impossible to get compliance to. So you're going to burn hundreds of millions and achieve very little, a bit like what they're not really achieving with the buyback as well. So, as I say, most firearms owners will say, yeah, if we have to register firearms, it should never have been done away with in the first place. But
that's the tragedy, isn't it?
Yeah. And it should have been implemented back in those the days when we changed it to a license system where they kept both. But one of the big issues is we also haven't kept up with a grand old thing called the internet. And those late 1990s laws that were brought in, a very short time later, Trade Me became a part of everyone's lives. And there's virtually no tracking and tracing of what's been sold on Trade Me, and I think you recall Heather Duplessis-Allen showed how easy it was for her to jump on Trade Me, and she bought a firearm unlicensed.
That's right, she got herself into hot water over that, I think, didn't she?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so there was a lot of loopholes there that were demonstrated quite some time back where you could purchase stuff off Trade Me, and from my understanding, the events of March, that bloke, got his firearms through an ACAT licence, which allows a sporting firearm licence, and we never kept up with the technology on that either. So AR-15s were still listed as sporting category, and you could get them on a ACAT licence, but there was nothing to stop that person going away and jumping on the internet and buying ECAT or military magazines for it, and combining the two.
I guess at least we've got to do what we can and start the frame for it, so hopefully in 10 or 15 years' time it's a bit more effective. You know what I mean?
We do, but we need to keep pace of especially things around the internet, and I don't see anything in today's legislation that stops quite a few of the loopholes that were there originally that caused part of this problem. So
I think the big issue is the big issue is that those who comply with the law are not part of the problem anyway. It's the people who avoid the law. Maybe it gives the police some sort of machine or some sort of mechanism by which they can do something about the illicit gun owners, but the gangs and all that. But the problem is the people who are happy to sign up to a register and everything, they're not part of the problem.
No, exactly, and that's where I think people sort of get their sort of lip a bit twisted on it, and not wanting to comply. And I think you're seeing that with that buyback situation as well. They're saying, well, should we have to come in here with our tail tucked between our legs as though we were part of the problem? And,
well, last night I read a text from a friend of mine that he sent to me privately, which is why I won't identify him. But he just sort of said, "I'm buggered if I'm going to be involved in this shaming dog and pony show."
Yeah, and it's a shame that guys feel that way, because as a member of the firearms community and through hunting and that over the years, we have immense respect for the police. They're there at the front line of search and rescue. They're a vital part of our communities. They keep our farmers whose land we hunt safe from poachers and that sort of thing. And so there's immense respect out there for that. And I just fear that now that people are saying, well, okay, well, blow it, I'm not going to step forward and that sort of thing, you create a...
Well, do you think people are just waiting till...
Potentially.
Do you think they're just waiting for a few months to see whether, in fact, anyone backtracks on anything, and whether, in fact, they don't have to hand certain guns in? Or do you think people are sort of hoping that there might be a change?
Well, yeah, I think they are hoping that, because one of the things you've got to remember with the decision today to go to 5-year licensing, currently it's a 10-year licensing system, and... At the moment, if you come in for a renewal or apply for a new licence, there's anywhere between a 4 and a 12-month backlog, depending on where you are and depending on how good the police resources in your region are.
There we go.
So bringing it back to 5 years, it's almost like you're going to be in a 4-year cycle.
So again,
and that's doubling the resources that we have now to deal with it.
So that's another good point. So again, it's a question of good to have the policy, but if we can't implement it, it's just going to be another embarrassment.
Yeah, exactly, and has this government talked about putting money into policing to do that? And, that's a huge resourcing ask when they're already consumed and up to 12 months behind. If we double that, then obviously we're going to be 2 years behind on current resourcing levels.
Excellent. Okay. Hey, thanks for that, Geoff. Thanks for your call. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.